All right, there we go. Let's get our Facebook folks in here. It's time to start the show, and we'll get it going. Scott will hopefully be over here in a second. All right, boom, boom. All right, welcome in, welcome in. It is the 1st of May. It's Wednesday morning. Welcome in, Broncos country. There's Scott right now, so he didn't miss very much. I am Nick Kendell, and there's Scott Kennedy. Scott, literally just starting, had to pull up the quotes from the Adam Schefter podcast and put them on a Google Doc. They do a translate thing now from podcast, so a little bit easier to pull the stuff, although of course you can't pull as much as you'd like. They give you the ellipsis at the end, so not as easy as you'd want. But how you doing? How did things wrap up there on the Falcons show? You ready to talk some more Pacific Northwest quarterbacks?
Yeah, it was a lot of, as you said before, it seems like a strange year to finish off the Pac-12 when it had maybe its best year in like 25 years
Yep.
Across the whole. And it wasn't just, one team, but it was multiple teams, multiple quarterbacks, multiple players.
But not
Let's get rid
USC.
of them.
Not USC, though. Really odd to see USC.
Yeah, but they still had Caleb Williams. I mean, they're
That's
still in
true.
the news because they got the number 1 overall pick.
Yep. Man, what a really what a travesty to have that caliber of quarterback and put up what they had around him on the defense and the offensive line. But it's pretty rare you talk about a quarterback from USC and be like, yeah, they probably will have a better supporting cast in the NFL comparatively. But we'll see. I think, not to get too immediately down the college football path here, Scott, but I'm on Lincoln Riley watch right now, because if you can't recruit in the trenches the way they're doing right now, I don't know if it's a California thing, although UCLA doesn't seem to be having an issue there as much. But yeah, it's I don't know if it's going to work for Lincoln Riley at USC if they're as bad up front along the lines of scrimmage as they showed the last 2 seasons.
Well, you start talking, you make me think Matthew Stafford, Detroit Lions. We said, oh, what a travesty to have a quarterback that good. Archie Manning, let's go way back, the New Orleans Saints. I talked about when Sean Payton was hired. Oh, he only won 1 Super Bowl with Drew Brees. I'm like, all right, Archie Manning, you remember him pretty good, right? He had like a 300 winning percentage in New Orleans. I mean, that's how bad New Orleans was before Sean Payton got there. What's interesting, though, is how people will start to turn and start to blame the quarterback over a certain amount of time. And Caleb Williams, he's a bust. It's his fault. Matt Ryan, choker. No, let's not mention the fact that they haven't had a defense. Again, Matthew Stafford, he went to L.A. He's actually pretty good. Funny how those narratives start to change a little bit.
Yeah, quarterback, far and away the most important position in football, one of the most important in all of sports, Scott, but you still need the team around them at the end of the day to reach the mountaintop. And reaching the mountaintop is everybody coming in here. Let's say hello to folks that don't see any super chats yet, so they don't love us, but they like us enough to come in and say hello. We got, of course, David Youngkin coming in, says, morning, everyone. Good to see you, David.
Michael came in with stars. The icebreaker, Michael Ronquillo, coming in, says, good morning, Nick and Scott. I'm Broncos for breakfast. Go Broncos. Good morning to you as well. And then Oblivion Empire following us over from the Falcons podcast. So he's just a fan of Nick is what it boils down to. And I came in so quick, I haven't changed my Albert Knopper's mailbox yet. So we'll do that here for everybody. He says, let's go. Have a great show, guys. Smash the like, guys. Bronco up. Just be careful. You can't say Broncos Nation around here. Be real careful. What's funny is someone's like, well, what is it? Is it like Falcons country? Is it Falcons Nation? I'm like, I don't think anybody really cares. Nobody knows. It's just rise up.
No, they do care around Broncos country for sure. Thank you so much, Oblivion and Michael, coming in with the support. We got Todd in the house. Said, morning, everybody. Good to see you. We got Donald Willison coming in. Said, good morning, everyone. So why has Bo become such a lightning rod in a lot of conversations? I find it would be a nice change from the self-important, flashy, look at me types. It's because a lot of folks did not identify him as a quarterback worthy of the 12th overall pick. But, that's going to play itself out. Right, Scott? At this point, it's everybody kind of, their opinions on it, but the opinion that mattered is the Broncos brass and the Sean Payton, of course. And the only way to change that opinion is to have games played, and not just, 1 or 2, but probably 8, 10, 16, 20 before we can really solidify those takes. But it's one of those things. I said it 100 times during the blip that was the Drew Lock era. We can debate until the cows come home, but the only way this is going to be solved is if time passes and we can look back with a retrospective analysis, not to be too on the nose of my epidemiological background there, but time's going to show itself whether it was the right pick or not.
Yeah, 2 points on this. Appreciate you coming in, Donald. If most of the people doing draft prognostications have Bo Nix in the 30s and you take him at 12, that's going to say it's an overdraft. Sean Payton is arrogant. There's no doubt about that. I've told you all that before he was hired. I'll tell you that after he's hired. You know it too. This was called an arrogant pick by Todd McShay. I disagree with that a lot, actually, for several reasons. One, because it was an obvious pick. How could it be an arrogant pick if it's an obvious pick? Because you needed a quarterback so bad, and Bo Nix can play quarterback. He's a really good quarterback. It makes total sense. Would I have wanted him in a vacuum as high as 12? No, we're not drafting in a vacuum. You're coming off of a really bad era. What would have been arrogant, Nick, was trading the freaking farm for a quarterback. That would have been arrogant, thinking that I don't need Pat Surtain and 2 first-round draft picks to win. All I need is a quarterback because I'm Sean Payton. That would have been arrogant. That would have been stupid. They didn't. They held at 12, kept their picks, got a quarterback of the future. Good job.
Yeah, I will say that there is a level of, you mentioned it, he is arrogant. There is an arrogance of, I know best, I know better. My scheme is so good that I don't need XYZ to have a Hall of Fame quarterback. And I mean, Drew Brees wasn't, big by any means. He wasn't an incredible athlete. I think there's a little bit of, what's it called, recency bias in terms of the arm talent conversation with Drew Brees, because he could spin it coming out of Purdue. There's a reason that some people that I really respect compared Caleb Williams to Drew Brees, and Drew Brees had an arm. He did not at the end, kind of like Peyton didn't at the end, but those guys could push the ball.
Todd says, Scott, clearly Sean Payton did not want McCarthy or Penix. Bo Nix was their guy. No, I'm not buying this, just because unless you pass on a guy, you don't know. I don't care what they say. Watch what they do. Until you pass on a player and choose one over the other. The Indianapolis Colts clearly wanted Edgerrin James over Ricky Williams. Clearly. The Washington Commanders clearly wanted Jaden Daniels over Drake Maye. Both Michael Penix and J.J. McCarthy were not available when the Broncos picked. Now, does that make it clearly? No, it doesn't. I know what they've said after the fact. The same thing they all say after the fact. We got our guy. We love him. This is why.
Yeah.
So no. Does that matter? No, it doesn't. Doesn't mean a hill of beans. All that matters now is what you make do with Bo Nix.
Yeah, absolutely. I will say, Scott, there's a lot of evidence that would suggest that after the first 3 came off the board, Denver was on Nix in comparison to the 2 listed there. We've seen videos and things put out there with the Falcons on 8, and Broncos aren't calling up. They're not, as soon as those top 3 are off the board, they're not trying to move up. We saw the Jets release video today with the 10th overall pick. You have the Raiders, I think the Rams, somebody else, Seahawks maybe also trying to come up, and Denver's not on the phone trying to move up. It's actually Minnesota with the Jets. So Atlanta also trying to move up to 10. I think we didn't talk about that as much as I'd like to, Scott, on the show. I think it was for Latu, but that's a different conversation. Denver wasn't, as soon as those top 3 came off the board, they weren't trying to move up. And I said it on last night's show, given what the Vikings offered and was shot down for number 3 overall, I'm glad that Denver didn't move up for me, because there's a level of just the risk associated with it. 12th pick is still
I didn't
see
what was reported that they offered.
You didn't see it? It was 11 for the Vikings.
11 and 23 and a 2025 probably.
2025 first, and I think another day 2 pick for 3 overall, and I believe a 5th. So that is
it's what we expected. Yeah,
that is what we expected.
That's what we expected. And we didn't expect the Broncos the only way the Broncos were going to try and beat that was with 12, a 2025, and Pat Surtain.
Yep.
And it would have been hard. That's too much. That's way, way, way too much for an unknown.
Especially for a team that on paper, I mean, Vegas has them at 5.5 wins. that 2025 first is something I do not want to give up. Now that you have your quarterback as well, we open up the board for my favorite spot. I'm already looking forward to 2025 draft. The defensive line talent on paper at this point. We'll see how it plays out, of course, but there are some first off the bus kind of defensive line guys in the next class that got me.
Nick, I worked in the recruiting business / NFL draft business for a long time selling subscriptions.
Yeah.
What kind of psycho buys a subscription to find out about high school kids in recruiting? Well, it turns out there's a lot of them. And I said, my business caters to the lunatic fringe of college football. And I can say that with a clear conscience because I am head lunatic.
Yeah.
The fact that you're already looking forward to 2025 cements that. You are nuts. That's okay.
Yeah.
That's why we're here. Lawrence, yo. Good to see you. And I want to talk about Michael Ronquillo as well. He says, Bo Nix is my quarterback. He's coming in with 5,000 stars. What does that mean? That means if he was over on YouTube, it would have been hot pink. When we talk about colors, like Troy coming in with that Broncos orange, it would have been flashing hot pink. It shows that flashes up here. Big boy stars for Michael Ronquillo and the Broncos for Breakfast podcast. Thank you, my friend. Troy following up with that orange super chat on YouTube. He says, hey, guys, seems like spending on undrafted free agents is a place having rich owners can make a small but maybe significant overtime difference. Also seems like Allen, Franklin Myers, Roach, and Jones is an upgraded DL. Have a great show. I think that's where you've upgraded. In the immediacy, you have improved the most in the offseason on the defensive line, which was where you needed to improve the most to get better from one year to the next.
Yeah, I think that you can include edge in that spot as well. Adding Ellis to the room overall should raise the room's talent. You still, I don't think, is there a single Pro Bowler in the lot, let alone all pro type? I think Allen maybe has that potential considering how young he is still kind of figuring out the 4-eye, 3-4 defensive end stuff where he came from Boston College, more 7 technique, a little bit more 7 technique stuff with Arizona as well beforehand. There's potential there. I will say that outside, their first couple seasons in the league, John Franklin Myers and DJ Jones are coming off their worst seasons since the years that got them the big contracts and the start of their big contracts. So we're on watch there for decline. But yeah, it definitely should be a better room. And I'm still hoping for the Broncos to add another 320 plus pound nose tackle to the room. I saw that Nate Ellis, the defensive tackle brother, was released 6'4", 340 or something like that from the Eagles as well. I mean, you got Blackson right now as your nose tackle body, so to speak. I think you have some reps there. We can have DJ Jones, but that's not where he's best, Scott, as that, eating up double team guy. So maybe you can still add another defensive tackle. Nose tackle. There's a lot of conversation before day 2 that Denver really would have been happy with Sweat. He went fast. So that didn't happen, but I do think there's a chance you still might add another nose tackle there. The spot for me on the line, you have great depth at edge, but I don't see a number 1 at edge either. But hey, again, back to the 2025 draft. There's going to be a chance to get some Avenger types along the line of Denver's picking as high as Vegas expects them to.
2 points on this one real quick before I forget them. He asked about UFAs. To me, UFAs is more about scouting than it is your ownership having money to pay an extra $10,000 because that's really what it boils down to. These guys are all billionaires.
Great point.
So really it's more about what is your history? What is the opportunity? How good is my scouting department? If I'm an undrafted free agent, the Denver Broncos call me and I look back and I say, okay, well, they had one last year who contributed. They had one the year before that who contributed. They had one year before that contributed. I like that the Denver Broncos are covering me. That to me is more about scouting.
I also think I want to add to that, Scott, real quick. We're so good at interrupting each other. It's about the ability to recruit and the interpersonal relationships too, because it is recruiting at that point. Let's be real. And if you have a coach who hit it off with a player, or if you have a relationship with that player's agent, sometimes they'll funnel them to that point. So yes, it's nice. You can throw a few extra dollars there, but as you mentioned, identifying the proper talent there in scouting, as well as being able to recruit these guys, is, I think, bigger than that extra little bit of cash.
And all of what I talked about, the identification and being able to show the path and the success, that's all recruiting. That's all part of recruiting is why do these guys 5-stars keep going to Alabama just to wait in line? Because they win national championships, become first round draft picks. You show a clear path for them.
A little money
show
too.
A clear path for them. Alabama wasn't the only one paying players though. So
I know that. But
and going back, the second point on this one was because Brandon came in with some stars that fell right into what you were talking about the defensive line and the edge room. He says, thank you for the stars. He says, good morning, guys. What do you think the pecking order will be at edge this year? I'll go first. I think you're still talking Jonathan Cooper and Baron Browning. Who am I forgetting? I mean, you signed Franklin Myers, but is he an edge or is he more of an opposite Zach Allen type?
He played a lot of 7 technique for the Jets, and then reduced inside to 4-eye 3 technique.
Yeah. So he's another DL. Not he's versatile, and would love the fact that he's good against the run. But I think, and then Ellis, I guess, is who you're talking about. Does he come in? I don't think he comes in right away and takes a job from Cooper or Browning.
I think that the real star of the room, based on last season's, again, stars doing a lot of heavy lifting there, but Benito was probably your most valued piece. And you're going to try, I mean, he made a huge step from his rookie season to year 2. Scott, in my opinion, year 1, I mean, hardly saw the field, didn't really look like he knew what he was doing. And the discipline in the run defense was not great. And that's never going to be his game. But I think it's something that he can continue to improve on. And he's super twitched up explosive. His ability from A to B is the best in the Broncos front, I think, without question. So we're looking at that. I also think you mentioned Browning and Cooper, Scott. I would be pretty surprised.
What you're going to say, so let me predict. I don't think one of those guys is going to be here.
I just don't. I mean, we've seen Denver do this a few times. The room is really crowded now. They talked about Drew Sanders' role as well. I think you're going to end up trading one of Cooper or Browning, and then it's probably Benito on the other side with Ellis a chance to emerge. You also have Sanders and Incoom in that room as well. I just think it's a little crowded. And with how the contracts are set up with Cooper and Browning set to be free agents next year, for sure you're not keeping both those guys. If you can get you flip let's say Cooper and a 7 for a 2025 5th, that's something I think, get the money off the books, reset the contract there, give yourself a chance, give Cooper a chance as well. I think that's something that's likely to happen.
And you ask yourself, okay, what's the market for these guys? What's the market for Browning? And let's say, would they be good fits for an edge needy team? Well, it just so happens we know a really edge needy team. And would Cooper and Browning be a fit on a team like the Atlanta Falcons, who ignored edge in the draft, except for Braylon Trice? Yeah. I'd give up a day 3 for Browning or Cooper. Sure. So they'll have a market. We weren't so sure on Malik Reed when he was going out. That was a no for the same question. And you spun him for a pick swap, I think.
I think it was for a 5th. I think you did him plus the 7th for a 5th. Maybe
it was a pick swap though, to a certain extent. So this one, I think you'd actually, I'd send you a day 3 straight up in this case. So Brandon, there's a lot of guys there, which means there's a lot of opportunity because I don't think anybody's entrenched. The only one that's safe is Ellis.
Yeah,
because he's the rookie.
Yep. So we will see what happens there. Again, it's a room full of, I think, good secondary options, but you don't have a true, line him up. This guy is a problem. You have to account for him every snap. If he gets one-on-one, he's winning kind of guy. But that's, teams outside of the quarterback position, that's the number one thing teams are looking for out there. Those true number one, if you leave him one-on-one, he's killing you type of pass rusher. Gary Palmer coming in $4.99. Thank you so much, Gary, for the support. We appreciate you always coming in and leaving comments as well. We also got Keith Brugman coming in, says we need to talk about last year's draft class. We need to see fit and production from Mims, Sanders, and Moss. Hopefully JL Skinner. Alex Forsyth has a chance to be a starter this season as well. We'll have a chance to talk about it, Keith. I think that's a little bit more once the dust settles. It's going to be a long off season, right, Keith? Once we get into June, July, it's happy May, everyone. Also, but we'll have a chance to look back into 2021, 2022, 2023, and start to have a little bit more solidified grades on a lot of these guys. I mean, even Scott, the 2023 class, it's too early to really judge them. It's like you had your first test of the semester. You still have 3 more to go. Where you sit with your grade, but it's far from a final grade, especially when you don't have premium selections.
Yeah, the early returns weren't very good. You got a Pro Bowl returner on Mims. Okay, that's nice. But that's not really why you drafted him and gave up draft picks to move up to get him.
Mm-hmm.
That's just gravy. 300 yards. What do you have? 377 yards and a touchdown. You want more than that. Yeah. Riley Moss, you didn't get much out of. So the early returns have not been positive. But as Nick said, the story's not written. It's first chapter.
Yep. Long way to go there. I do want to say hello to Jeremy. It says, morning, boys. Speaking of former quarterbacks like Rivers, wonder if Peyton Manning or Drew Brees will be a resource for Bo to reach out to. Seems like those guys, I mean, their time is obviously still very valuable. But given their connection to Sean Payton / the Broncos, they might make themselves a little bit more available for somebody like Bo Nix. But really, it's going to be the relationship with Webb, Sean Payton, that are going to be the big ones there, in my opinion. But those guys, I mean, an hour once a month or, sitting down, going through some tape, maybe a throw-in session or something. I wouldn't be shocked at all if at some point in June or July, we hear that Bo Nix spent, 2 days at the Peyton Manning compound going over tape and doing some throwing stuff. That wouldn't shock me one bit.
I don't know for sure. I think they already have a relationship. Didn't he do Manning camp? Most of these guys have done Manning camps through the years.
Yeah. The only guy that like big quarterback I can think of, because I mean, let's be real. We always talk about the volatility of quarterback prospects and whatnot, but almost all these guys were super recruits as well. And most of those guys go to the Elite 11 or the Manning camp or something. I think the only one that didn't was JJ McCarthy. I think Peyton mentioned that as well. It might have been because of the broken hand that McCarthy had coming out or something with, Harbaugh's kind of an odd duck. Maybe Harbaugh didn't let him out of something to go down there and do that. But we'll see what happens with the Chargers, man. He's what Harbaugh's going to bring. So we got Miguel also coming in and says, good morning. Now that the draft mortgage is paid and the cap mortgage will be paid next year, I think Denver's in a great position to build around next through the draft. It's a great start. I mean, really, Denver doesn't have a lot of bonus capital in 2025. So they have a chance to build through the draft, but trying to maximize Nix's rookie contract with where Denver's at, I think it's going to be more so through free agency. Scott, you have almost nothing on the books in 2026, which means next year in free agency, you can pay guys that almost cost nothing against the cap and that have the bigger cap hits down the line.
I'm with Miguel on this one, and I'll tell you why.
Okay.
It's because let's say, all right, what's your season prediction for the year? I think it's going to be pretty similar to about 8 and 9 that it was last year. I think 7 to 9 wins makes sense to me for this team. So let's say you're right there and you're picking in the 12 range again. I can go get an exciting prospect at 12 if the draft is anything like it was last year without having to worry about quarterback that I don't expect to really come in and contribute right away, where I would be excited about Roma Dunze coming in at 9. If I had Dallas Turner coming in, if I had Leatu Latu, if I had Brock Bowers coming in. So Miguel, correct me if I'm wrong, and I don't think I am. I'm excited about the draft picks that I will have moving forward, knowing that my biggest need is filled, so to speak, going in. So I'm looking forward to the draft again because I can get an impact player. I can get an exciting prospect because I got my quarterback. Now, in 2 years, you might be back in the quarterback market. You don't know, but right now, yes, I got a high pick. I got money. I'm excited. First round pick, maybe in the 20s, but I got a first round pick. I got my first round pick. Didn't have to give it up. Didn't mortgage the future. And I got capital coming in for 2025.
Again, I just think given where you're at, you don't have extra capital, Scott. Like if you had multiple first round picks, then you can really build around quickly through the draft. But that's one player who is, let's be real, it's still a draft prospect. They are volatile and not a for sure thing. And with how much resources the Broncos are going to have in terms of the rich ownership, how they can structure contracts. And again, will you still have a big dead cap hit next year? The way you can set up contracts is you can pay guys almost nothing their first season on a contract. So Denver is going to be for sure big time players, I think, on the market next season. You're going to have more immediacy return building around
Oh, yeah.
the
I'm just saying
3-year
you have
window.
reason to be excited about the
Oh,
draft too,
yes.
not
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
free agency.
Yep. I just think free agency is a little bit more on the nose in terms of the benefit of building around Bo
It's
Nix.
not a competition.
It is.
Both.
It is, Scott. I'm right.
Excited about both, Nick. Quit trying to piss on one of them.
Nope. I'm gonna piss. Oh, actually, well, I don't want to do anything. Here, I don't want to get no comment on that one. But yeah, I mean, heck, I'm excited for 2025 draft already because there's probably 10 defensive guys I'm like rubbing my hands for. Yeah. The defensive front guys next season, couple cornerbacks, Luther Burden out of a Missouri wide receiver, and some really good offensive tackles as well. So not going to have the wide receiver class next year that we had this season. Probably not the volume of offensive tackles. Definitely not the quarterbacks. I don't know if you saw Shadur Sanders putting his foot in his mouth yesterday on Twitter as well. Come on, my guy. What's going on? But Troy Boer never puts his foot in his mouth.
Just take the high road, man.
Not great. You didn't have to do that. Troy comes in.
That's the thing is, when I used to talk to, and he's older, he's in college. When I used to talk to kids, people used to love those quotes when, the negative quote, I picked this team, so I want to say something negative about them. I used to protect them. I'm not gonna turn 2 million fans of whatever team against an 18-year-old kid because he put his foot in his mouth. Not gonna do it.
Yeah.
Just for clicks or for whatever. I will just ignore that. Well, they've got direct access to the world now, and I can't stop you from doing that anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was a mistake, and he'll learn.
I hope so.
I hope so too.
He's a talented kid. But
yeah, you don't need to if someone else is, talking poorly about the ex, he was a great teammate. I wish him luck moving on. Take the high road, man.
Sometimes the best thing you can do is have no response and that kind of thing. You didn't have to say anything. Troy Boer coming in says, speaking of relationships, I read that John Franklin Myers' agent respected George Payton, so called him first when given permission to seek a trade. Yeah, Denver obviously had a need for the position, the ability to bring him in, and I didn't hear about him calling first, but it makes sense. George Payton's somebody has a lot of relationships in the league. He's been in the league for a while, well-respected individual as well. So that's great. John Franklin Myers should be a great addition to the defensive front. Again, I don't think he's going to be a transcendent talent, but you're going from Jonathan Harris to John Franklin Myers. That's a big step up on paper, Scott.
Yeah, it's a free agent signing almost. We call it a trade. It's like you didn't even give up anything for it, and you got him. That's a great deal. That really was a great deal. Talk about fitting a need and not having to give up anything other than money for it when you had money. That was a great signing. And again, the relationships on this one, it makes a big deal. And having the relationships within the league help. It opens up options. Can I deal with this team? Can I deal with that team? I don't think I can move down because I've been accused of tampering. It's the relationships, they're big. You don't want to be overly friendly, but you want to be able to work together as well. Jonathan Fowler coming in with a yellow super chat. Love it. Thank you, sir. He says, I dig more into Nix. I'm getting excited. He diagnoses info quickly and is surprisingly mobile. There's no surprise about it. When he was having trouble throwing the ball under Mike Bobo, he basically became an option quarterback. He is a good athlete, no doubt about it. You mentioned a possible trade from 12 to 20. Doesn't matter now, but curious what that would have been. Yeah, I think the trade was off the board when Atlanta took Penix, just gone. No, we can't move. Let's hope that nobody jumps us to take the 6th quarterback.
Yeah, what I heard was that it was a trade with the Eagles. So it would have been 12 to 22. And it was a pretty good deal as far as the capital back. But as you mentioned, I think Albert Breer put it out there that as soon as Penix went off the board, Denver was like, well, Nix is our guy. We don't want to risk it. And I respect them for that process and sticking with their evaluation. If you identify as a quarterback as your head coach's guy, you probably shouldn't pussyfoot around by any means there. So, I do respect that, and we'll see if I think the process is fine. We'll see how the evaluation plays out over time. As far as the surprisingly mobile, Scott, he's also the type of mobile that I like at quarterback too. You have Jaden Daniels, who's mobile as well, but he's rail thin. And a lot of times that athleticism doesn't lend itself to the passing game. It's more hit that backdrop. It's not there. I'm getting north and south, which to me is not as translatable. I also, with how he kind of runs, he doesn't really protect himself. There's some cartoon hits out there from Jaden Daniels, which just like, my God, dude, what are you doing? Bo Nix is sturdy. He's strong. It's not like he's, Cam Newton, Anthony Richardson type of athlete size power, but he's a good level. They're still all the same, sturdy build. And I'm really excited to see what the Broncos can do. I think you're going to have a step back this season, probably in terms of the red zone passing efficiency. And it's not because Bo Nix can't be good there. I mean, the best thing he did at the Senior Bowl this season, Scott, was that I think it was day 2 red zone drills where he went like 7 for 7 or 7 for 8 or something really good there. But the ability for Sean Payton to use some of the quarterback power stuff that he really liked to use with Taysom Hill in that Bo Nix package. And where is that really valuable? 3rd and short, goal to go situations where you are forcing, it's really a compact area. It's power football at the end.
So 400 rushes for 1,600 yards and 38 touchdowns.
Yeah, he can run.
It's only, we won't get into that. He's a good athlete, and he's been a good athlete for a long time.
But my point is that he's a good athlete without it being a fearful type of athlete. Like for me, the smaller, frail guys who play athletic and don't protect themselves, is that going to translate to the NFL? Nix is sturdy, thick, built low to the ground, definitely a weight room guy, big hands. That's the type of athlete I'm looking for. Now, would it be great if he was, a little bit faster, a little bit more twitched up, like a Anthony Richardson kind of player? Yeah, of course. But then he would have gone higher, right? It's a different conversation there. But he's definitely athletes. When you make the scouting the positives and negatives, strong athlete is one of the positives that's going to be on there without a doubt. The one and only Big E Bronco. Big E, it's been a second, man. Hope you're doing well. Big E says if Bo Nix was in next year's draft class, he'd be the number 1 quarterback off the board. Maybe. I mean, you never know what another year would be like. JJ McCarthy, if we said the same thing about McCarthy being younger, Nix would be 25 at that point. He's still already the 3rd oldest quarterback ever drafted. But I guess it's possible. Next year's draft class right now looks poor. I would say that Carson Beck, I think, is a really good quarterback prospect and a little bit more prototype Jared Goff-esque. That's not typically my type, but he can spin it. So I think it'd be a conversation with Nix and Beck as profiles. But yeah, it's certainly possible. 2025 looks a little bit lesser. And I think that 2025 being lesser also has something to do with 2026 being a class that we're really projecting there, Scott. But there's some big time recruits in that class.
Big E Bronco, if you believe this to be true, it doesn't really have anything to do with Bo Nix, because it has to do with what you think of the 2025 class, because Bo Nix as a prospect is as high as he's ever going to get. When you come out of the last couple of seasons, when you're 24 years old and you've had the season that he has, like 40, I'm going to say 45 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. He cannot do any more. He cannot have a better season. We want to see this. What could you possibly want to see from Bo Nix in another year in college where he would be up his stock? He can't do it. He's as high as a prospect as he was ever going to be. And if he was a junior, I would have told him to come out. Dude, come out. This is as good as it gets. So with his age, with his production, if you believe that he would have been the number 1 overall board, that says more about the 2025 class than it does about Bo Nix. Bo Nix has maxed out his stock of where he was, just based on the tools, based on the production, based on the age. This was as high as the stock was ever going to be. And that's not a negative. That's just the way it is. What else does he have to prove? It's one of those, what else does he have to prove in college that would have improved his stock? Nothing. Yeah. He's done.
Yep.
He's done it all in the college game.
And what else does he have to prove? Well, it sounds like he really proved himself to the Broncos and Phillip Rivers, Scott, over the draft process. On the Adam Schefter podcast that was released yesterday, he went into the conversation about the Broncos process with Bo Nix and how he worked with Phillip Rivers. So it says on this, give me a second here, Scott. I got a few bits to read. Broncos, Bo worked with the Broncos, of course, and Sean Payton, after the throw day, Sean Payton turned to the rest of his group, to the rest of his travel party, and said, did you all see what we saw? And they were like, yeah. And from that moment on, the Broncos were determined to go and pick Bo Nix. Now, Sean Payton was calling around in the interim, and one of the people he called in advance was Phillip Rivers. Obviously, everybody knows Phillip Rivers. Love him, hate him. I respect him. Who was working with Drake Maye and Bo Nix down in Alabama. And Phillip Rivers was impressed by Drake Maye, but Phillip Rivers was really impressed with Bo Nix. He's like, Sean, this guy can spin it. And Sean, this guy's bigger than I thought. And Sean, this guy's a better quarterback than I thought. So I think Sean Payton and the rest of the Broncos were thinking, wait. Phillip Rivers is working with this guy down here in Alabama, and he sees what we see, which led him to go into the tape and break down all the throws even more. And by the time the draft rolled around, and I tweeted out after the draft, Sean Payton felt the same, or Adam Schefter there. Sean Payton felt the same about Bo Nix that he did about Patrick Mahomes in the 2017 NFL draft. Now, that doesn't mean Bo Nix is going to be Patrick Mahomes. Let's not get carried away. But he loved Mahomes in 2017 when the Saints were 11th and the Chiefs leapfrogged him. Now in the draft, Sean Payton loved Bo Nix like that, sat there at 12, was able to wait and get him. And now we'll see if Bo Nix can have the kind of career Sean Payton believes he can. Again, the work was done. The talent is there. He had the incredible private workout experience and the calls with Phillip Rivers, all the research, and they felt like he was a good quarterback as any quarterback in this class. And that's going to be one of the fun storylines to watch here, the Denver Broncos and Bo Nix going forward. So,
all right, I'm gonna take the negative side of this just based on some history, because I've now heard this twice.
Okay.
I've heard this twice. The thought process is, we talked about this on Monday, was, does there seem to be a disconnect in quarterback scouting when you've got 12 go in the top, you got 6 go in the top 12, and then another one not going for another 150 picks? Is there really that big of a difference between these guys? Now, we hear Sean Payton didn't want to have the same mistake happen when they missed out on Patrick Mahomes. Make sure you get the guy. You know who else was in the room with Sean Payton and New Orleans Saints when they missed out on Patrick Mahomes? Atlanta Falcons general manager Terry Fontenot was in the room when that mistake was made, and that has also been brought up as a justification for taking Michael Penix at number 8 overall. Seems to be some overcorrection, possibly. Find out, oh no, I missed out on this. I better not miss out again. Time will tell. We'll find out.
Yeah, only time will tell.
It's amazing how much Patrick Mahomes has influenced this draft.
I mean, the NFL as a whole, right? From scheme to the type of quarterbacks to the type of offenses, he is, unfortunately, right now looking like the NFL's Michael Jordan era right now. But we'll see. Obviously, things can change, especially when Andy Reid retires. But yeah, no, Rivers worked with Nix, and he was blown away by Nix in the end. Now, that being said, the Broncos, it was revealed that, we liked him like we liked Patrick Mahomes, but Nix was apparently the third quarterback on Payton's board. So what does that say about the other two guys they evaluated that they didn't get? But in the end, again, I come back to it. I'm not working with all the puzzle pieces. I don't get the private workouts. I can only evaluate the tape there at Oregon with the age and the tangible traits. Those to me looked like a solid starting quarterback option. James Palmer did an interview. He called around the league. People were comparing him to Derek Carr style of quarterback. People were comparing him to Andy Dalton. People were comparing him to potentially Dak Prescott. Day 2 grades in the end, but that doesn't mean he's not. Those are all, in hindsight, those would all be first-round picks, Scott. Maybe not Andy Dalton. The other ones would be.
I thought Andy Dalton went at the back end of the first. Maybe I missed that one. Did he go top of the second?
He was like pick 34 or something. It was the draft.
He was at the Senior Bowl, I think, the Cam Newton year. I just remember that.
Yes.
I think, or it was the Andrew Luck year. I just remember being there, and I was asked about the quarterbacks that were there. I said, there isn't a quarterback here that's going to make me forget that Andrew Luck isn't. That was a quote I remember saying back at the time. At least that's how I remember it.
It was a 2011 draft. I think he went pick 34. And it was the year the Bengals, they took A.J. Brown in the first and then turned around in the second and took Andy Dalton and rode that rookie. What did I say?
You said A.J. Brown. Two great receivers, but A.J. Green. Those I'll remember because Julio Jones and A.J. Green, we'd been following them since they were those two had been coming up and been comparisons since they were sophomores in high school. That was a fun time. And that class, that wide receiver class was pretty magical.
But they
Going
went
over
on
to
a
the
really good
defensive
run.
side of the ball, Troy comes in with the super. He says, how do you think the suddenly young and crowded defensive back room shakes out?
We are on Riley Moss roll watch, in my opinion, right now, for what the defensive backfield looks like. Last season, he obviously was really good when he had a chance in special teams as a gunner. Now, you're not trading up in the third round for a gunner, but at least he was making an impact on the field. And he had a limited amount of reps as a defensive back, working back from a hernia. But when he did have reps, they were a box-esque dime backer role. We saw a lot of that the last 6 weeks of the season, relatively. I mean, how often are you actually in 6 defensive back looks, dime backer stuff? But that to me says that it's not just boundary cornerback stuff we're talking about here. We're also talking about potentially safety as well. The only 3 spots on the defensive backfield I feel good about the roles are, of course, Surtain, boundary cornerback, McMillan slot, and Jones safety. I think your boundary cornerback spot opposite Surtain is up for grabs. Probably Levi Wallace, but we'll see. And I believe the safety spot opposite Jones is up for grabs. I know you brought back PJ Locke. You have Caden Stearns here as well, if you can. He's the Greg Dulcich of that class. I think there's a chance that it's a Locke versus Moss battle at safety, as well as a Moss versus Mathis versus Wallace battle at the other boundary cornerback spot. But they liked Moss enough to move up for him.
Can you do that? Or do you have to kind of decide going in? Can you cross-train the guys enough where you get an honest competition to say, okay, you're going to get a shot here, but if it doesn't work out, we're going to put you here? Or do you really need to go into the camp knowing you're competing for one of the 2 spots?
I think with considering what teams are asking of defensive backs now with the off zone coverage, the 2 deep safety stuff, you do need to be cross-trained to an extent, unless you are a super niche kind of player. But I think Mathis and Moss's skill sets lend themselves to potentially finding a role at safety, nickel, or boundary. With the tackling questions, I do think they can, kind of like how offensive tackle can fail outside to into guard. I think you could have Moss/Mathis fail on boundary their way closer to the line of scrimmage with the physicality and the tackling.
into nickel, into safety.
Yep, exactly. So again, some of the Moss stuff was, people I've spoken with have said there's a chance that don't just write in PJ Locke as a for sure starting safety, because there's a really good chance we have a Moss versus Locke battle at safety.
And I feel like the only 2 that are locked in, no pun intended, is McMillan. He's got a spot. He's earned a role, and Surtain. And then Jones.
You paid him.
Yeah, I mean Jones and those 3. Those 3, and then the other 2 spots are open, cornerback 2 and safety 2.
Yep. And Troy brings up JL Skinner. I don't think Skinner has the athleticism or range to be a 6th-round pick as well. I don't see the ability to be a true safety in the NFL, but again, Moss last year played a dime back role. That's something that if Skinner can take over, given his frame, length, and be that 6th defensive back, that in the box safety type for those kind of roles, that's a fine return on investment, especially the special team stuff for a 6th-rounder. But I don't think Skinner ends up the safety. Now, granted, they didn't subject him to practice squad or anything last season, so we'll see what happens here. I guess you do have to toss out his name, but he feels further down the pecking order than those other guys.
He feels odd man out if everybody stays healthy, but they won't. So, does he end up being a practice squad guy? And then watch Caden Stearns. Caden Stearns is kind of the wild card here. You can't necessarily count on him, but he's there. So if he plays his best, then he's got a role. And Moss, if he plays his best, he's got a role. The ceilings on those guys are higher than someone like JL Skinner.
Yeah, and I think Mathis struggled last season staying in phase. He was picked on a bit, but still a good athlete, and played cover 4 at Pitt. And a lot of times that cover 4 stuff, they do treat it more like a safety. I think he can trigger downhill physically, tackling wise as well. So we will see. There's going to be a battle there. I mean, I've said it on the shows many times. I don't think that the reason the Broncos are poor this season is because of the offensive infrastructure. Now, it'd be great if we had a little bit more star power at the skill positions on offense, difference makers out there, especially with a quarterback like Bo Nix, who can identify things pre-snap and be a Rajon Rondo type rather than an Allen Iverson type. It'd be nice to have a difference maker on the boundary, which I don't think we have. But if Denver has a poor season this year, it's probably because the defensive talent is just not. You don't have difference makers up front, and you have too many questions. But there's a lot of battles to be had, Scott. How does the edge room shake out? What linebacker 2 opposite Singleton, safety 2, cornerback 2. A lot of spots that are going to be worth monitoring OTAs in camp.
Yeah, it's funny. You mentioned it's like, okay, the defensive talent isn't there, and we just raved about the upgrades on the defensive line. That's how poor it was last year. Yeah. It's like not only were you outmanned, the guys that you were counting on didn't play all that well except for Zach Allen. DJ Jones regressed, okay? DJ Jones should be better this year. He should. You're better across the defensive line. If depending on how much better you get, the defense can actually improve significantly over, especially statistically, over the course of 17 games where it was pretty rough.
And I will say, I mean, we'll have a chance to get into the offseason as well. But last season's defensive output was very much predicated. The turnaround was very much predicated on something that is not very likely to be replicated in terms of the rate of turnovers and the rate of fumbles, Scott. The falling on fumbles is pretty noisy and not repeatable year to year. And I think if you remove the turnovers, which is a big part of football, but they're volatile year to year, Denver still was pretty emphatically a bottom 5 defense. I think they were bottom 10 even if you remove the first 5 weeks of the season.
Right. So the bar has been set low. You can improve, and it still needs investment over the course of the next 2 seasons, obviously.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. So, Scott, any final thoughts on? I really enjoyed Schefter's podcast here, revealing the Broncos process. I will say that hearing Philip Rivers talk about him and how the Broncos went through it all makes me excited again, because the Broncos and Sean Payton had conviction about the pick, and they went out there. I don't feel like they settled. Now we're going to find out in hindsight if the evaluation was correct, but they got a guy that they loved, and that should make Broncos countries feel excited about it. I know they talk about me being a math person. I want to see the work in terms of, they mentioned the analytics. What does that actually look like? Like, what were your filters? I need to find somebody in that analytics department with my connections and talk to them just to get what the actual math was on that. But again, they did the work. Rivers loved him. Sean Payton loved him. Pretty cool revelation there to hear from Philip. Yeah, revelation to hear from Philip Rivers loving him as well.
My final thought on that is I'm jaded enough that I don't care what they say after the draft. After the recruiting class, after the draft, I really don't care. They all say the same things.
Yep.
Their process was great. We got the guy we wanted. So I don't care. I want to see the field now. I want to see Bo Nix week 1. I want to see him in the preseason. I want to see him in the preseason take some snaps. I don't want to see, okay, well, he's going to be our number 1 guy. We're not going to play him. No. I want to see him get some reps. I want to see it. The rubber hits a road. I don't care about what they have to say about the process and how they got how they went about getting every single guy that they wanted with every single pick. I don't care. And that's not the Denver Broncos. That's across the board. Nobody ever missed on draft day. Nobody ever misses on recruiting day.
Yep.
Now we need time. Now we need a place. Now we need to get to football.
Yep. And we do need to wrap it up here, but I'm with you, Scott, on that. It is cool to hear about the process. And again, if you brought in Sean Payton, you don't really have a chance, or not. You cannot, bring him in and give him the keys and then not give him the power to go get his quarterback. But these two are going to be entwined, and it's going to be a legacy defining pick for Sean Payton. I think what we're hearing, the internal process was fine if you evaluated him that way. What we will find out, though, is if the evaluation was good or not. Process can be good, but the evaluation can be bad. So we'll find out. And as you mentioned,
again, the only way none of what they have to say matters. So that's fair, Scott, but hearing the details is fun. I just have a different definition of fun. Yeah. I don't care about what any coach at any time has to say about who they pick, because they're all going to rave. It's all the same thing. I don't care. Mm-hmm. Now I want to watch football.
Yep.
Now I want to see them throw the ball. I want to see them play. I want to see them play. I want to see results. Yep. Yeah. What's the phrase? Don't tell me about the labor pain. Just show me the baby. I don't care.
Yeah. Yep. Without a doubt. And final point here, Scott, that I'm just so with you on, and I'm not calling out anybody specifically, but be weary of those who drastically change their perspective as soon as a player is wearing your team's colors. You should do the work and the analysis and be, I've written many scientific papers out there, Scott, or helped write many scientific papers, read 1,000 times more. And you always talk about the process and the strengths and weaknesses in your study analysis. We can say that as well from where we're at right here. But as soon as, player X, here's the analysis before, and then they're drafted. Oh, actually, I was way too hard on all these things. He's actually, instead of a day 2 grade to me, he should have gone first overall. That's one where it's like, I don't really trust your process or your biasy. I'd be weary of those type of folks. Again, some of it is the cope, without a doubt. But again, not that anybody specifically is doing that, but I really do appreciate you saying, I don't really care what they're saying now. We did the work beforehand. We're standing by that work. We'll see how it plays out once we gather new data and film to analyze the way it should.
We'll regrade how we thought of guys based on hindsight, but I will tell you, I missed. Mm-hmm. Okay. Do I think Bo Nix was a little bit too high at 12? Yeah, I do. In 3 years, we'll see if that was right or wrong. I'm not going to change how I thought based on where he was picked. So yes, I agree with you. And again, the justification of just be honest, be intellectually honest, be honest, be accountable. That's it. Not afraid to say we're wrong. Be honest. It's dishonest to regrade, to change history. It's dishonest.
Yep, it is. So we got Michael coming in, closing us out here, saying, great show today, Nick and Carl. Oh, well, thank you for that one. Must have been from last night there. We did have a great show on building the Broncos, but now we got a great show on Broncos for Breakfast with Nick and Scott. So appreciate you, Michael, coming in here, closing us out. That's going to have to do it for us. We got things to do, babies to take care of, work to do. Probably I'm going to go right up this Phillip Rivers stuff at some point today. And again, just kind of fun if you have a chance to listen to Schefter's podcast. He drops some interesting tidbits and information about the Broncos process stuff and that revelation again about what Rivers had to say about it as well. So will be fun to go back and listen to that. Thanks everybody for coming in today. Make sure you're following Scott and I on Twitter. Scott is at Scout Kennedy. I'm at Nick Kendell MHH. Also follow us, of course, at Mile High Huddle. If you haven't done so yet, our Facebook pages are facebook.com/Mile High Huddle and facebook.com/Mile High Huddle pod. After the fact, I mean, people who listen later, I'm about to go on parental leave here, Scott, so I'm going to be listening to a lot of podcasts while baby's screaming or walking the baby and the dog or whatever. But if you listen after the fact or you're a podcast person at all, find us on Spotify, find us on Apple, and please leave us a 5-star rating and review if you believe we've earned it, of course. And as the ticker says here underneath, please subscribe to Mile High Huddle over on YouTube, like our show, and share on social media platforms. Wanted to give a shout out to all the super chats that came in today supporting us. Michael Ronquillo, Oblivion Empire, Lawrence Rivera, Troy Boer a few times, Brandon Williams, Gary Palmer, Keith Brugman, Miguel Santos-Steven, Jonathan Falk, the one and only Big E. Good to see you, Big E. Appreciate everybody coming in and all of you as well who did not do a super chat but dropped a thumbs up on the way in, the way out, and contributed to the channel. We appreciate you guys. Scott, final thoughts.
I like this comment outside the echo chambers. I like truth. It might not be truth, but it'll be honesty because we're trying to predict the future. We don't know the truth, but we'll be honest. That's the key here. It's the difference between I tell it like it is versus I call it like I see it. I call it like I see it. I might not tell it like it is.
Yep. The difference between prospective and retrospective, Scott, right? So again, putting on my scientist hat there, but appreciate everyone. Y'all have a great rest of your day. We will see you again Monday morning. Happy May. Choose kindness and compassion. Go Broncos.